Well, the James Madison Legacy Project is a grant from the Department of Education. It's a seed grant, and it is to involve students who are high-need students, a high percentage of free lunch and or Title I schools. So across the country, for 3 years, we'll have 3 cohorts of 675 teachers in each cohort, which is huge, I think. And the hope is that through professional development of those teachers, each group of those teachers, each cohort is 52 hours of content and pedagogy, that they will learn how to incorporate the We the People program into their classroom, including conducting hearings in the classroom, and eventually getting involved in the state programs for the We the People program. Well, 2 years ago, Diana Owen from Georgetown and she's a professor of political science, we conducted a study in Indiana, mainly because I had a lot of contacts with Indiana teachers. And so we involved about 20 teachers, 10 schools, and so we picked We the People teachers, and then their counterparts were teachers who taught government but didn't teach We the People. And they were also counterparts in the sense that they were similar in terms of how many years of experience they've been teaching, as well as their educational background, so we could factor that out. And then we pre-tested the students and teachers in the fall, and then went through the first semester, and then post-tested them in December and January, and to find out if there was going to be any differences between students who had We the People teachers and those students who had, quote, traditional teachers. And the results came in quite clearly that students who were involved in the We the People program scored higher on content knowledge questions than students who were not taught by We the People teachers. In fact, students who were not in the We the People program but were taught by We the People teachers in the spring did did better than the students who weren't involved with the We the People program or didn't have teachers that involved in the We the People program. So that study enabled us to then support our grant proposal with the seed grants, and said, we've got research to suggest that this program has an impact on students. And then I think it's one of the reasons why we were able to secure this particular grant and then include Diana Owen from Georgetown on this huge study that we're doing now with the 3 cohorts, again with 675 teachers in each of those 3 cohorts, and the thousands of students that are going to be involved in this. It's massive, I think, and the results, I think, will show that teachers who have good professional development matters in terms of what their students will do in the classroom. I like to say, I don't really like to say it, but I do, and that is that kids are victims to what teachers don't know. And therefore, the more that we can teach them about this content, about government and civics, that their experience with their students is going to be so much more, they'll learn so much more in the classroom. There's a couple of things. One is, I think, and I'm obviously biased, but I think the textbook is fantastic. And if you look at it closely, it's questions. It's not statements. It's what are the philosophical foundations? And we're not trying to suggest that we're telling them that. They discover that. Also, I think the genius of the program is twofold. One is there are hearing questions or essay questions that have been written on each unit, 3 of them at each level, at the congressional district level, the state level, and the national level. And those questions drive the students for research purposes and for learning. And then they're also the basis for the simulated congressional hearing, which is really a way of a performance-based assessment of students. So students who are involved in the program throughout the entire semester, then in the end, will conduct these hearings to demonstrate their knowledge of the content. And to do that, they have to work in teams of groups of kids together, and they have to write and they have to speak. So they're able to, I think, instead of, look, I like testing. I think multiple choice tests are fine. But these tests, this way of testing students, in addition to that, is a way for them to demonstrate what they know. And the good news is that sometimes parents see this, other teachers see this, the superintendent might see, the principals might see what the kids are doing, and it clearly shows that they know more than most adults about government and the Constitution. You can't not see that if you go to a congressional hearing. And what's nice also is the curriculum is leveled at the fifth grade, generally speaking. There's a level 1, level 2, and a level 3. So it's not just at the senior year, it's also for middle school kids and for elementary kids. And we think that if you live in a democratic republic, that citizens who have power need to be knowledgeable, and therefore a comprehensive program that goes K through 12, or at least upper elementary through 12th grade, is vital to making our democratic republic work and sustain itself. Well, in one sense, this program is about power, all right, intellectual power that can be used. And unfortunately, in this country, kids who come from high needs neighborhoods or high needs areas seem to be or feel powerless. And there's every indication that they are. And so therefore, a way out of that, it seems to me, I mean, look, this is not an answer to poverty, but it is an answer to giving people who seem powerless more power. And why do they get that? Because they now have an understanding of who and where in terms of government can they go for answers to problems in their community, if in fact that is what they need to do. Not that government's the answer to everything, but that when it's there, who's responsible? And it gives them, if you're going to criticize the government, if you're going to demonstrate against it, you're doing it from a level of understanding of, look, there's a First Amendment. I have a right to assemble. I have a right to free speech, and I have a responsibility to tell my government when they're wrong. And I think that when students understand that, and how do they understand that? During the Civil Rights Movement, the Martin Luther King and Fred Shuttlesworth, Reverend Shuttlesworth, they didn't just send kids out on the streets with no knowledge. They taught them civic education as a precursor to withstanding the dogs and the hoses. They went out there on a mission that this was part of their responsibility under the Constitution. That applies today. If you have problems with how government's working or the police force or whatever, having an understanding with the Constitution and how you deal with it to me is going to give you much more of a powerful way to deal with that particular problem. Well, I've always had, I guess I'm a product of my age in terms of the 60s and 70s. And, I watched as President Nixon, waved goodbye to America. And was that a terrible time in American history, or was that a great time in American history as thinking about the most powerful person in the world in terms of government, waving goodbye and didn't pull out the army to keep his power? The transition happened, and we kept going. Living through the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement to a certain extent, I was a young child then, but suggested that there's something about the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, when I went to Indiana University in the mid-'70s, you were more likely to hear the words Karl Marx than you were James Madison. I think there was a rejection of the Constitution as it wasn't working because of all these riots and things, and because of the 60s and early 70s. Maybe it's not working. And so at universities, it seems like there was a real push towards alternative sources of government, socialism, or even as far as communism as being okay. And I think what happened is when the bicentennial period came around, 76 and then again in 87, there was a a new tidal wave or a new wave of let's re-examine the Constitution. And that's when I got involved with it professionally. And it was, as I learned, as a learner about the Constitution and Bill of Rights, realized the genius of the founding period, and that it opened up an opportunity so that today more people are free, more people have opportunity than ever in American history or world history. Not that this government is perfect. You know, Madison said we're looking for the least imperfect form of government, and I love that. He understood that humans are flawed, that if you have a system of government and you put people in it, be careful. We know we have to have a government because he said in Federalist 51, men aren't angels. By the way, either are women, right? But if you put them into power, be careful. So then you end up with dispersing power as much as you can. And that reflects to today is that we sometimes are frustrated with Congress and gridlock, and we use those terms when in fact it's checks and balances going on. You know, the founders believed that be careful what legislation you pass, and we're going to make the Senate check the House in a sense, because there are human beings in there and they can make mistakes. It's not perfect. And I think sometimes people today think that government should be perfect or that they have all the answers, and they look towards government to solve their problems, when that's, I think, a Faustian bargain. My opinion is that government is necessary, we have to have it, but we need to limit their power and disperse that out. And we as citizens, our biggest role is watchdogs on our government through elections. You know, sometimes there's discussions these days about, well, let's have term limits on Congress. Well, there already are term limits. You vote them out if you don't like them. And we don't exercise that power. And therefore, I think civic education, especially with disenfranchised youth, can give them the power to understand that they too can have a role in government and to check government and make sure it's working for them in that sense. Well, there's a similar skeleton, if I may, and that is that what is needed is content. Teachers will tell you that what they need is more content. They come out of colleges not knowing a lot about how to teach government because a lot of them are social studies teachers who have had responsibility to learn a lot of different areas. And so this is a way for them to get specific content on government and the Constitution and Bill of Rights with leading scholars in America on these subjects. And we tie them to the units of our textbook, of the 6 units, the content part of it. But it's not just the content, which is vitally important, but then it's how do you take these big ideas and get them in the heads of young people? Well, that's where the pedagogy comes in, and that's the professionalism of teachers, is they're experts at not necessarily the content, although they're learning more content, but then how do you take these big ideas and translate them into high school kids, middle school kids, and elementary kids' minds? That's a skill. And then a third component of the Institute is, because we believe the congressional hearing is so important to be able to demonstrate their knowledge of what they've learned, the students, the teachers do the same thing. The best way to learn about the congressional hearing is to actually do it. So while the teachers are here for 4 days, they're getting content, the pedagogy, and then they're practicing these congressional hearings just like what they're going to have their students do in the fall. And they will conduct those at the end of the Institute, and they'll be nervous, they'll be scared, but when it's all done, they're going to be so excited about what they've learned and been able to demonstrate in front of judges who are asking them tough questions on what they've learned in the last few days. So it's a beautiful thing.